The sound of a moppet was almost midnight at Google's Mountain View headquarters. The sprawling campus that usually buzzed with voices, screens, and the sounds of creation had fallen into a deep hush. Most lights were off, and the echo of footsteps bouncing off glass walls had become rare. Even the coffee machines, once humming with purpose, sat silently in the shadows. Only a few glowing monitors remained forgotten screens, left awake by engineers too focused or too tired to shut them down. But in one lonely hallway, beneath the gleaming floors and towering innovation posters, there was still one man working. His name was Ramón. He was the night janitor. He wasn't young anymore, 62. His back ached every time. He pushed the heavy mop bucket forward. His knees groaned when he bent down to pick up a crushed soda someone had carelessly tossed under a desk. He didn't complain, though. Not once. In fact, Ramón often hummed while he worked an old Mexican folk tune his grandmother used to sing while making tamales. It made him feel connected to something bigger than just a floor and a mop. Something that reminded him of dignity. No one really noticed Ramón, not the engineers, not the interns, not the product leads or designers. They were kind, sure, but kind in the way busy people are distracted, polite, but distant. Some smiled, some nodded. None asked how he was. None asked why he worked so late, or if he had a family waiting at home. And maybe that was fine. Maybe Ramón preferred it that way, but that night, someone did notice him. That someone was Sundar. Pichai, he wasn't supposed to be there. Sundar had left his office hours ago and was halfway home when he remembered something. A file, an old notebook actually. Something personal, scribbled with ideas from years ago. It wasn't important in the grand scheme of things, but something inside him nudged him to go back, so he returned quietly. Parked in the far corner of the underground garage and took the back elevator up to the 6th floor. He walked in silence. Past conference rooms named after constellations, past walls lined with achievements, trophies, and historic photos. And then he heard a soft, steady swish. He turned a corner and saw Ramón, hunched over, scrubbing a coffee spill near the elevator with slow determination. There was a bucket next to him, steam rising slightly from it, and an old radio playing faint music. Sundar stopped. For a moment, he didn't move. He just watched. There was something deeply human in that moment, something grounding. It wasn't the act of cleaning itself, but the commitment behind it. Sundar had spent the day in back-to-back meetings talking about artificial intelligence, global strategy, acquisitions, and innovation. And here was Ramón still working, alone, wiping. The floor like it mattered. Like it truly mattered. The CEO could have walked past him, nodded politely, and carried on. But instead, Sundar walked slowly up to him and said something he hadn't said to many people in his life. "Do you ever sleep?" Ramón chuckled. "Only on Sundays," he replied, not looking up. "The rest of the week, sleep and I are on speaking terms." Sundar smiled. "What's your name?" he asked. Ramón stood up, straightening his back slowly. His brown eyes met Sundar's, tired but proud. "Ramón González." "How long have you worked here?" Ramón looked around as if trying to count the years in the shining tiles and spotless windows. 11 years, maybe 12. "I stopped keeping track after my daughter graduated high school." "You have kids?" Sundar asked softly. "2. And 2 grandkids now. My wife passed a while back. But they keep me going. And this job helps me feel useful." Sundar didn't say anything for a moment. The hallway suddenly felt too quiet. Then he asked the question that had been growing in his heart since he saw Ramón scrubbing that spill. "Do you like working here?" Ramón thought about it, really. Thought about it. "It's not about liking," he said. "It's about meaning. I clean because someone has to. And I do it well because I was raised to believe that every job has dignity. People think cleaning is beneath them. But you know what? If I don't clean, this place falls apart. Slowly, but surely." Sundar nodded. Something about those words struck him harder than any corporate strategy memo he had read that month. "I used to clean." "Too," he admitted. Ramón raised an eyebrow. "You?" Sundar laughed gently. In college and after, I cleaned classrooms to pay for books. My hands used to smell like bleach. Sometimes they still do in dreams. There was a long silence between them. And then Sundar did something unexpected. He took off his blazer, rolled up his sleeves, and picked up the second mop Ramón had tucked behind the closet door. Let me help. Raymond's eyes widened. Sir, you can't just Sundar, he said calmly. And yes, I can. And so, for the next 20 minutes, the CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in the world and aging janitor worked side by side. They didn't talk much. Just the soft sounds of mop against tile, the faint rhythm of the radio, and the shared understanding of what it means to work when no one is watching. When they finished, Ramón looked at Sundar with something between gratitude and disbelief. You didn't have to, he said. But I did, Sundar replied. And I'm glad. Before leaving, Sundar looked at him and said, come to the third floor conference room tomorrow at noon, please. Ramón frowned. Why? Sundar smiled. Just trust me. And then he walked away, leaving Ramón standing there in the hallway, mop in hand, heart pounding with confusion and curiosity. Ramón stood there long after Sundar had disappeared. The hallway was silent again, but something inside him had changed. He wasn't sure what it was yet. Maybe it was the way Sundar had looked at him, not like a janitor, but like a man with stories worth listening to. Or maybe it was the way his hands no longer felt invisible, whatever it was. It was unforgettable. But what awaited Ramón the next day was something he could never have imagined. Asterisk. The invitations next morning felt different. Ramón woke up to the same old buzzing alarm at 6 a.m., the same aching joints, and the same weak coffee brewed in his modest kitchen. But something about the air was heavier charged, even not in a bad way. More like a question waiting to be answered. He sat at the table for longer than usual, staring at the steam rising from his mug, replaying last night in his head. He imagined it. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, standing beside him with a mop in hand, scrubbing tiles and humming to a folk tune. It seemed impossible, surreal, even. Yet the soreness in his back wasn't a dream. And the words were still fresh in his mind. Come to the third floor conference room tomorrow at noon, please. Ramón hadn't told anyone. Not his daughter, not the grandkids. Not even his neighbor Don Manuel, who usually knew everything before. Anyone else. Part of him didn't want to spoil the moment by speaking it aloud. The other part wasn't sure what to believe. As he packed his lunch up. Leftover tamale and a banana, he caught his reflection in a microwave door. His gray beard was fuller these days. Wrinkles had settled beneath his eyes like permanent. Reminders of the nights he never rested properly. He tucked in his faded shirt, the one with the stitched name tag reading Ramón G, and side whatever was waiting at noon. He decided he'd face it with dignity. The morning passed like a blur, sweeping, emptying trash cans, wiping down tabletops. The usual sounds of keyboard clicks, echoing laughs in hallways, and sneakers squeaking across freshly waxed floors filled the building again. The engineers were back, the meetings resumed, and the Google world spun on. But Raymond's eyes kept drifting to the clock 11:50. He put the mop away early, washed his hands twice, once with soap, then with sanitizer. He combed back his stinging hair with his fingers and took one deep breath before stepping into the elevator dock as he rose to the third floor. His mind raced. What was this about? Was he in trouble? Did Sundar regret last night? Was it some kind of test? When the elevator doors slid open, he nearly stepped back inside. The hallway wasn't empty. There were people. Lots of them. Men in crisp suits. Women with clipboards and tablets. A camera crew with lights half set up. And in the middle of them all was a long glass-walled conference room, glowing like a spotlight had been turned on from above. Ramón. Gonzalez? Someone called. He flinched. Yes? Please, right this way, the young woman said. She had a badge that read Executive Operations. Her voice was warm but brisk. Is something wrong? He asked. You'll see. He's been waiting for you. He? Mr. Pichai? Ramon followed her and Dot as he stepped into the room. Every sound seemed to fade. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way everyone looked at him, not with annoyance or confusion, but with ... respect. And there he was. Sundar stood at the far end of the room, next to a large screen that displayed the words, "Google recognizes extraordinary contributions." Ramon paused at the door. "You're early," Sundar said with a smile. "I like that." "I wasn't sure if this was real," Ramon muttered. Stunned, Sundar walked toward him, hand extended. "You told me last night that your job keeps this place from falling apart. You said it with pride, and I believed you. But you also reminded me of something important, something too many of us forget." He turned toward the audience. "This man right here has worked quietly, tirelessly, and without ever asking for recognition for over a decade. And when I saw him last night scrubbing the floor long after everyone had gone home, I realized something. Our foundation isn't code or servers or capital. It's people. People like Ramon." A hushed murmur went through the room. A few employees leaned in closer. A camera light blinked on. Raymond's throat went dry. "Today," Sundar continued, "we want to honor Ramon Gonzalez, not just for his service, but for reminding us of who we are. So, starting now, we're creating a new recognition called the Quiet Pillar Award, and Ramon will be the first ever recipient." Ramon blinked ... double quotes the ... "What?" Sundar motioned toward a sleek black box on the table. He opened it, revealing a glass award shaped like a tall flame. "This symbolizes your quiet strength, your perseverance, and your light. It will also come with something more practical," Sundar added with a wink. "Full retirement benefits. Whenever you choose, full medical coverage for you and your family, and an education grant for your grandchildren." The room erupted into applause. Ramon stood frozen. Applause washed over him like rain, but he didn't move. He couldn't. His lips quivered. His eyes glistened. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Sundar placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You do, and more." When the applause died down, Sundar leaned closer. "There's another reason I wanted you here," he said quietly. "I read your file this morning, your story. What you sacrificed to keep your family going. You're not just a janitor. You're a teacher, a carpenter, a caretaker. You built more than floors. You built a life." Ramon finally found his voice. "But I didn't do anything ... What you did," Sundar replied, "was show up every day with integrity in this world. That's the biggest thing anyone can do." A tear slipped down Raymond's cheek. The cameras were still rolling, but no one interrupted the moment. Finally, someone handed Ramon the award. He held it with trembling hands, staring at his own reflection in the glass. For the first time in his life, he felt seen. Not for the broom he held, but not for the uniform he wore. But for the man he had always been. After the ceremony, Sundar invited him to his office. "There's one more thing," he said, handing Ramon a thick envelope. Inside was a letter, neatly typed, addressed to Ramon from the CEO's desk. And behind it, an invitation to speak at the upcoming Google Global Summit. "Me? Speak?" Raymond's jaw dropped. "We're talking about leadership this year," Sundar explained. "I want them to hear from someone who leads with humility. Someone who never chased a title, but earned more respect than most people ever will. I've never given a speech in my life." "You've been giving one every night for the past 12 years, Sundar said softly, just without words. Ramon didn't respond. He simply sat in silence, heart pounding, eyes drifting toward the giant window behind Sundar's desk. Outside, the sun had started to rise higher, casting long rays across the city. It was the same city he had swept, cleaned, and walked through every day. Unnoticed. But today, something had shifted. People had seen him. And now the whole world was about to hear him. But as Ramon walked back toward the elevator, something strange happened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out of the stairwell. His eyes were sharp, his phone pressed to his ear. And when he saw Ramon holding the award, he paused. just for a second dot, and then he slipped back into the stairwell, disappearing as quickly as he had arrived. Ramón didn't think much of it, but he should have, because that man wasn't supposed to be there. Dot, and what he did next would change everything. Asterisk shadows on the staircase, elevator doors slid shut behind Ramón. And for the first time in years, he felt lighter. Like the weight of quiet years had finally been acknowledged, and the silence of his sacrifices had been broken. He looked down at the award still resting in his hands. The flame-shaped glass catching the light like a small sunrise. He had held many things in his life tools: mops, callous hands of struggling workers, his wife's trembling fingers in her final days, but this was different. This wasn't about the object itself. It was about the story it now represented. The man he had always been beneath the uniform. The quiet pillar no one noticed until now. But even as he stood there, soaking in the echoes of the moment, something else tugged at the back of his mind. That man in the charcoal suit. His face was sharp, angular, not familiar, but not forgettable either. There was something strange in his eyes, not surprise or curiosity, like the others, but something darker, calculating. He hadn't clapped. He hadn't smiled. He hadn't even hesitated before turning away. Ramón tried to shrug it off, telling himself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. Maybe an executive caught in a rush. The building was full of people, and not all of them paid attention to ceremonies. Not everyone knew what mattered, but deep inside, something uneasy stirred Dot, and he wasn't wrong. Across the building, on the other side of the security floor, the man in the charcoal suit walked briskly down a hallway marked Confidential Operations, Authorized Only. He slipped past 2 doors, waved a badge that wasn't his, and entered a room dimly lit with blue monitors and soft hums. He wasn't part of the janitorial staff. He wasn't an engineer. Dot, and he certainly wasn't just passing by. His name was Calder Lynch. Dot. He was an internal contractor, someone brought in during restructuring phases to evaluate efficiencies. His real role was more complex. Hired quietly by the board of directors to review long-term expenses, streamline departments, and recommend eliminations that wouldn't make headlines. He was ruthless. Efficient. And dangerous in silence. Calder had been quietly tracking operations that didn't align with his budget forecast. Janitorial staff was one of them. Outsourcing had saved money elsewhere. He'd already drafted a recommendation to remove all in-house maintenance and replace them with third-party contracts. Cheaper, faster, no emotional attachments. And then he saw the ceremony. His expression remained calm, but his pulse quickened as he watched Ramón receive the award. As the cameras recorded the CEO himself tying his name to someone he had already scheduled for termination, this changed everything. Or rather, it threatened everything Calder had built behind the scenes. He picked up the phone. "I need to move up the report," he said into the receiver. "And we need to prepare a response in case the CEO asks questions. Make it look like this was already in the system months ago." A voice on the other end hesitated. "But what about the publicity? The cameras? The stories going viral?" The more reason to act fast," Calder hissed. "We can't let sentiment dictate policy. If this janitor becomes a symbol, we lose control of the narrative. I'll handle it." Back in the janitor's break room on the lower level, Ramón sat alone, staring at the plastic lunchbox he'd forgotten to eat. The tamale was cold now, but he didn't mind. He wasn't hungry. His fingers traced the edges of the glass. A word. It felt like a dream. One day he was invisible. The next. Honored in front of executives, gifted retirement benefits, and invited to speak at a global summit. He didn't know how to process it. So he ID in single quotes T. Instead. He opened the notebook he carried in his back pocket, a small weathered book filled with scribbles, thoughts, and old poems. He had started writing in it when his wife passed. Not because he considered himself a writer, but because it helped him grieve without speaking. He flipped to the last page and wrote, "Today, the world saw me." But what they saw wasn't new. It was just uncovered, like light hidden under dust. I wonder how many others are still hidden. Just then, Someone knocked on the break room door. Ramón turned. A young man with messy hair and a security badge stepped in awkwardly. You're Ramón, right? Yes? I was at the ceremony. It was incredible. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For reminding me why I came here. I've been building software for 3 years, and I forgot what. It meant to build anything real. You made it feel real again? Ramón smiled. Thank you, he said gently. That means more than you know. The young man lingered, then left Dot and Ramón sat in silence, unaware that just one floor above. Calder Lynch had begun quietly submitting documents that would erase everything. Ramón had just been promised the system update was labeled Q4 Restructuring Initiative, and Raymond's name was tagged for transition and phase out. But Calder didn't stop there. He needed to bury the decision behind bureaucracy, make it seem automated. He began forging internal memos showing Raymond's position had already been outsourced in April. He falsified timestamps, adjusted email chains, even included a pre-signed approval that he copied from an old document with a retired VP's name. He knew how to cover tracks, and the moment he hit send, a cold grin slid across his face. By the time Sundar realized what had happened, he would be too deep in summit preparations to undo it. Downstairs, Ramón finally stood up. He placed the award on the shelf beside the microwave where others could see it. For him, the moment wasn't just about pride, it was about proof. Proof that people who stayed quiet still mattered. He grabbed his mop and resumed work. The day wasn't over. Just didn't care about speeches. And besides, he had something inside him now that felt new. A voice. For the first time, he believed it might deserve to be heard. But as he walked down the west hallway, a senior project manager stopped him. Hey, Ramón, are you okay? Yes, he said, confused. Why? It's just... Well, I saw a memo. Said you were being reassigned? That doesn't make sense, right? I thought you... Raymond's hands tightened around the mop handle. A memo? Yeah. Came from upstairs. Something about facilities outsourcing. Ramón felt his heart dip. Not because he feared losing the job, but because after all that recognition, something didn't add up. Do you remember who sent it? I think someone named Calder. Not sure. I'll check. Ramón nodded, forcing a calm smile, then walked away. But something inside him had shifted. A crack had appeared in their shine. Something was wrong. And this time, he wasn't going to ignore it. As the building lights began to dim again for evening shutdown, Ramón headed back to the janitor's office, not to clean, but to make a phone call. To the one person who might believe him. To Sundar Pichai. Whispers in the system. Phone in Sundar's office vibrated quietly. It didn't ring often like regular phones. Most of his communication was filtered through assistants, scheduled calls, or silent notifications on encrypted channels. But when it did ring, when someone dialed directly, it meant urgency. He glanced at the screen and paused. It was the facilities line. Sundar picked up the receiver. Hello? There was a brief silence, like the caller wasn't sure if they should speak. Then came a voice, soft but steady. Mr. Pichai. It's Ramón. Sundar straightened up in his chair. Ramón. Are you all right? I don't know. Some things. Not right. What do you mean? Ramón hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to sound paranoid or ungrateful. But his gut told him this wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone told me today that there's a memo going around. That my position is being transitioned, outsourced. But you said... I did. Sundar interrupted, already feeling a chill. Crawl up his spine? I meant every word. Then why does the system say otherwise? Sundar's fingers were already moving, pulling up the internal dashboard, logging in through an executive override. He searched Ramón Gonzalez. The screen flashed, loaded, then populated with a document marked Q4 Facilities Restructuring. He clicked it. At first glance, it looked routine. Boilerplate language, standard codes. Then he saw it, Raymond's name highlighted under the phase-out list. Dated 3 months ago. Signed. Approved. But the signature wasn't his dot, it was from a retired executive who had left the company 2 years ago. A knot tightened in Sundar's chest. This wasn't a clerical error dot, this was deliberate. He leaned forward. Ramón, I want you to stay calm, but listen very carefully. Don't sign anything. Don't acknowledge any reassignment. And if anyone asks you to leave, you call me immediately. I will. Good. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Sundar hung up, his mind racing. He wasn't just angry, he was betrayed. Somewhere in his own company, someone had gone behind his back to undermine not just a man, but the message he stood for. He opened a secure line to his chief. Of staff? Maya? I need you to a full audit on internal personnel restructuring, he said firmly. Focus on facilities, especially anything submitted in the last 3 months. Use the security log archive. Flag anything with unusual sign-ins. Maya didn't question him. On it. While she worked, Sundar sat back and stared out the window. He thought about his own journey arriving in the U.S. with little money, sleeping on a hard dorm bed, scrubbing lecture halls at night, dreaming of what might be possible. He had worked so hard to make it here. But people like Ramón, they had been working just as hard their whole lives, without any spotlight dot, and now someone had tried to erase that in secret. Not on his watch dot, meanwhile. Ramón walked the empty corridor slowly, each step echoing like a question. The fluorescent lights flickered softly above, and the familiar scent of wax tile filled the air. This was his domain, the spaces most people passed through without thought. He knew every corner, every crack, every creaky panel. But tonight, it felt different. Like the building itself was holding its breath. He reached his closet, opened the metal door, and stood there staring at the worn shelves stacked with supplies, bleach, gloves, mops, a half-eaten granola bar, and on the top shelf his notebook. He pulled it down, opened to a blank page, and began to write. Truth is quiet. It doesn't shout. It waits. And then it rises. He didn't know what Sundar would find. But for the first time, he wasn't going to wait in silence. He was ready to speak. Maya worked through the night, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She had been with Sundar for nearly 8 years. She'd seen tech scandals, leaks, and competitors move like shadows. But this felt personal. She pulled up the server logs and cross-referenced Calder Lynch's. Something strange emerged. On 3 occasions, Calder had accessed the executive archive without clearance. Twice at 3 a.m., once on a Sunday. And all 3 times, they correlated with document timestamps related to facility contracts. She traced one of the login sessions to a terminal in an unused office near the back stairs. When she pulled up the camera feed from that floor, her heart stopped. There he was, Calder, head down, alone. Plugging a flash drive into the terminal. She immediately flagged the footage, packaged the audit report, and sent it to Sundar's personal inbox with the subject, "We've got him." Sundar opened it 10 minutes later. His jaw clenched. He called Maya. "Schedule a meeting with legal and compliance," he said. "First thing in the morning. And have Calder brought to my office. I want him to explain it to my face. What about Ramón?" Sundar paused. "Keep him in the loop. But for now, don't tell him the full extent. I don't want him to worry." But it was too late for that because downstairs, Calder had already made his next move. At 11:40 p.m. Calder entered the janitorial office. He wore a polite smile, holding a folder in one hand and a dismissal form in the other. "Ramón," he said gently. "Good evening. I was hoping to before you left." Ramón turned, wiping his hands on a rag. "What can I do for you?" "Just wanted to clarify some confusion," Calder said, setting the folder down. "There's been some administrative reshuffling, and it seems your name came up in the transition list. Now, I know our pichai made an announcement, but unfortunately, some of these changes were already locked months ago." "That doesn't make sense," Ramón said slowly. "Believe me, I understand. But this comes from the board. All we Need is your signature to process the compensation. It's generous. A year's pay, full benefits, no hassle. He slid the paper toward Ramon, but Ramon didn't touch it. Instead, he looked up and asked one question. Why are you afraid of me staying? Calder blinked. What? If this was just a formality, you wouldn't be here, in the middle of the night, asking for a signature. Calder's smile twitched. Look, Ramon, I'm trying to help you here. No, Ramon said, standing tall. You're trying to erase me. Just then, the door behind Calder opened. It was Maya. With two members from legal. Double quotes Mr. Lynch. She said calmly, You're needed upstairs. Immediately. Calder's face drained of color. Maya looked at Ramon. Mr. Pichai asked me to tell you he's proud of you. Then she turned to Calder again. Let's go. And as they left, Ramon sat back down. He didn't feel victorious. He felt steady. Like the building wasn't just holding him up anymore. It was standing with him, but he had no idea what Sundar planned next. And when the truth finally came out. The next morning, it would shock not just Google. But the entire world. The announcement. Sun rose over Mountain View like a quiet promise, painting gold across the Googleplex's wide glass windows. Birds glided lazily across the sky, unaware that something extraordinary was about to unfold inside the building. Staff filed in, as they always did, badges swinging from necks, coffee cups in hand, minds already drifting into code, meetings, and metrics. It felt like a regular morning, but at WES, single quotes to because upstairs in the executive briefing room, Sundar Pichai stood in front of a whiteboard, eyes narrowed in deep focus. Beside him were Maya, the legal team, and the head of internal security. On the table sat a thick file filled with evidence, altered documents, time-stamped surveillance footage, forged approvals, and statements from employees who'd been asked. To stay silent, he wasn't angry anymore. He was ready. How far do you want to take this? Maya asked gently, though she already knew the answer. All the way, Sundar replied without hesitation. This isn't just about Ramon. This is about every person who's ever been erased by a spreadsheet. It's about dignity. We let this go and we send the wrong message to the world. Asterisk, the team nodded. They'd seen him handle global controversies with quiet strength before, but this time felt different, more personal. Sundar turned to the head of internal comms. Prepare a company-wide town hall today, noon, and tell the press. I want transparency. The executive blinked. You want cameras? Yes, Sundar said calmly. Because this is the story that needs to be told. Meanwhile, Ramon was sweeping the east corridor, unaware of what was brewing above. The building still felt strange to him, like it had shifted under his feet. Every now and then, someone he didn't know would stop him and say, thank you, or give him a quiet nod that held more meaning than a full conversation. He appreciated it, but he didn't understand why, until his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya. Town hall. Noon. Please come to the main auditorium. It's important. He wiped his hands on his cloth, heart fluttering again. It wasn't fear this time. It was something else. At 11:55 a.m. The main auditorium was full. Rows of employees, reporters, cameras on tripods, and live stream feeds. Buzzing on laptops. People murmured, curious, confused. There had been no press release. No agenda. Just an internal memo that read, a matter of respect, truth, and accountability. Then the lights dimmed. A single spotlight came on. And Sundar walked onto the stage. No fanfare. No music. Just an asterisk, asterisk. He looked out across the crowd, took a breath, and began. Yesterday, something happened that reminded me why I came to this country in the first place. He said, his voice calm but full of fire. I came here to dream, to work hard, to earn every inch of ground beneath my feet. But I also came here because I believed in something deeper, something many forget in the race, to build the future. He paused. That every person matters. There was a long silence in the room. Not just the engineers, not just the innovators, but the people who stay late, clean quietly, carry burdens without applause, and build the very foundation we stand on. A soft murmur rippled the crowd. 2 nights ago, Sundar continued, I met a man who reminded me of this. A man named Ramón Gonzalez. He's worked here for over a decade. Never missed a shift. Never asked for anything in return. And when I saw him scrubbing a spill alone at midnight, I realized this company doesn't just run on code. It runs on people like him. In the back of the room, Ramón froze. Every eye turned toward him. Stand up. Ramón, Sundar said softly. Ramón hesitated. Then slowly rose. People began to clap. It started as a polite gesture, but within seconds it swelled into something massive. A standing ovation, not forced, not performative. It came from somewhere deeper, like they were clapping for every silent worker they had ever ignored. But Sundar wasn't finished. Unfortunately, someone inside this company tried to erase that man. The room fell silent again. Documents were forged, signatures faked. An entire restructuring plan fabricated to quietly remove him after we had honored him. Gasps. Employees looked at one another in disbelief. The man responsible is no longer with the company, Sundar said firmly. We have initiated legal proceedings and will be reviewing all personnel actions taken under his oversight. He turned back to Ramón. And as for you, Ramón, your award stands, your story stands, and so does your value. The applause returned, louder this time, some people wiping tears from their eyes. Ramón stood motionless, overwhelmed, heart thudding like a drum in his chest. Sundar raised a hand for quiet. But today isn't just about correcting a wrong. It's about making a change. So today, I'm announcing the creation of the Dignity Initiative. He pointed toward a new slide on the screen. Dignity Initiative, honoring the unseen. This program will seek out, uplift, and support the silent pillars in every corner of our organization worldwide. Cleaners, cafeteria workers, drivers, mailroom staff. Anyone who has been overlooked, we will now see, not once a year, but every day. The room erupted, and as the reporters scrambled to cover the breaking story, Sundar walked off stage, not to return to his office, but to where Ramón stood in the back. Come with me, he said. They walked quietly through the garden, past sculptures and water fountains, until they reached the rooftop terrace. From up there, the city stretched out endlessly. You could see the hills in the distance, the roads weaving like arteries through a living organism. How do you feel? Sundar asked. Ramón looked down at his hands, like I'm dreaming, but also ... like I finally woke up. Sundar nodded. You're going to be asked to speak. At the summit, at schools, maybe even Congress. Are you ready? No, Ramón chuckled. But I'm willing. That's all we need. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sundar said something. Ramón would never forget. You taught me more in 20 minutes with a mop than I've learned in years of meetings. Ramón didn't reply. He just smiled, but the peace of the moment wouldn't last long, because the next morning, as headlines celebrated the Dignity Initiative and social media flooded with praise for Ramón, someone from Calder Lynch's past stepped forward. A whistleblower. And what he had to say would threaten to unravel everything Sundar had just rebuilt. Asterisk. Echoes that never found a newsroom. Lights glowed bright as screens across the world lit up with one headline after another. Google. Janitor becomes symbol of corporate humanity. The Dignity Initiative goes viral, millions uplifted by Sundar Pichai's bold stand. Ramón Gonzalez trending worldwide, calls grow for labor reform across tech sector. In just 48 hours, a quiet janitor had gone from pushing a mop under silent fluorescent lights to becoming a global inspiration. News anchors replayed clips of the town hall speech. Influencers posted videos in solidarity with workers, often unseen. CEOs from other industries released statements. Some pledged change. Others tried to copy it. But none could replicate the authenticity behind Sundar's decision or the quiet strength Ramón embodied. And in the center of it all, Ramón remained unchanged. He still woke up at 6 a.m. His back still ached. He still made weak coffee in his tiny kitchen. But there was something new in the air around him, an invisible thread of purpose that now tied his story to millions of others who had lived in shadows for too long. But then everything took an unexpected turn. On the third morning after the announcement, Sundar was sitting in his office, scanning the early reports on the Dignity Initiative's response metrics when Maya burst through the door, her expression tight, eyes filled with alarm. "You need to see this," she said, sliding a laptop toward him. Sundar leaned forward. On the screen was an anonymous interview recorded in dim lighting, voice altered, identity hidden. But the words were clear and chilling. "I worked under Calder Lynch for 3 years. What he did to Ramón wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. He manipulated data, ghosted approvals, and built private shortlists of employees, mostly older, mostly immigrants, to slowly phase out. All without notice. We were told to stay quiet or lose our jobs." Sundar's face hardened. "Can we verify this?" he asked, voice low. Maya nodded. "We already started, and sir, the rabbit hole runs deeper than we thought." "How deep?" "Some of the terminations happened while you were abroad during international conferences. Approvals forged. Entire trails erased. Hundreds of people." Sundar closed his eyes for a moment. "Bring them back," he said softly. "Every one of them. Some can't be found," she whispered. "Some left the country. Others, well, some didn't recover from what happened." The silence in the room was crushing. Sundar slowly stood up. "Then we don't just fix it, we face it." He didn't wait for the board. He didn't write a sanitized statement. Instead, that same evening, he went live streaming a personal message to every employee and partner across the globe. He stood in a simple room. No logos, no suits, just truth. "Sometimes leadership isn't about being right," he said. "It's about making things right." He admitted what had been uncovered. Not defensively, not with polished language, just openly, with the humility that had earned him the trust of so many. He paused, then looked directly into the camera. "And for those who were silenced, hurt, or lost because of what was done, I named ... I am sorry. We are not a company of perfection, but we must be a company of accountability." He then announced the creation of a new department, Equity and Restoration Services. It would investigate every unjust removal, reach out to each person affected, and provide financial compensation, reinstatement offers, or educational support, whichever best served them. In leading that department, not a lawyer, not a human resources executive, but Ramón Gonzalez, when Sundar called Ramón to offer the position. The janitor didn't answer at first. Not because he didn't care, but because he was sitting in the hallway with one of the building's newest janitors, a young woman named Tasha, 22, 2 jobs, caring for her sick mother. Afraid she'd lose everything, she was late even once. He had found her crying behind the supply closet. He sat with her, listened, told her a story about a man who used to clean floors and thought no one would ever notice. Only after she stopped crying did he check his phone. He read the message. Then he called Sundar back. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure," Sundar replied. "You don't need a degree to lead people with compassion. I've never run anything before. You've run the hardest race of all, Ramón. And you didn't just survive, you lifted others while you did." Ramón didn't say yes immediately. He asked for one condition. "I'll take the job," he said, "but only if I still get to clean. Not full time, just enough to remember who I am." And Sundar said yes. In the months that followed, change came like slow but steady rain. Google's Dignity Initiative expanded to partner campuses. Stories poured in from India, Nigeria, Brazil, Poland, stories of quiet workers who were finally being seen. Awards were no longer reserved for product launches or revenue milestones. They were given for kindness, for perseverance, for invisible acts of greatness. Students at universities started inviting janitors to give commencement speeches. And at The next Google Summit, Ramón took the stage. No cue cards. No teleprompter. Just him. His story. His voice. When I came here, I didn't know much about technology, he told the room. But I knew what it felt like to be ignored. I knew how to sweep shame off a floor so no one else had to see it. I knew how to hold the weight of silence without letting it crush me. He paused, voice steady. I never wanted applause. I just wanted dignity, and now we're giving it to others. The applause was thunderous, but it wasn't the noise that mattered, it was the echo, an echo that would reach places the spotlight. Never touched, 1 year later, Ramón retired on his own terms. Not because he was tired, but because he was ready. He passed the department to Tasha, the young woman he had comforted months before. She was now leading the next generation of voices for the unseen.